Good afternoon, welcome to the fourth day of London Collections Men on SHOWstudio. Today we're going to be talking about England's only real luxury conglomerate, or well maybe it's not conglomerate, luxury powerhouse, Burberry. How Burberry can become a better company and what might be going wrong with them. To talk about this we have on our right William Oliver.
I'm William Oliver, Vice President of Content and Design for MCM.
My name's Karinna Nobbs. I'm a Senior Lecturer in Digital Fashion Strategy.
And I'm Mimma Viglezio, a consultant and Editor-in-Chief of Lula magazine.
Great. So I've been reading a lot about how Burberry, it's a struggle, but what seems to be quite confusing is that their sales aren't particularly falling massively. It seems to be more a struggle of the share price. Is this correct?
Yes, I think the share price is struggling slightly.
And why is this? So why should people care about this? Why is this? There's been lots of articles saying, what's wrong with Prada? What's wrong with Burberry? Susie Menkes is very worried about Prada's windows.
I think we have to make a difference between financials and economics, meaning that you can have a company that still has positive growth, meaning that sales, revenues and profits grow, but they are below expectation of the financial community, meaning that the shareholders want more growth or more EBITDA, more profits. And in that case, if that doesn't happen, your share can fall and can fall badly. But it doesn't mean your company is going bankrupt. Mm-hmm. But it's also sure that if your share falls, you have a problem because you can't not give back to the shareholders, and hence you might be I was in a situation where the company I was working for was forced into cuts and layoffs, but then the people inside were like, we're still selling and we're still selling a lot, but you were not in line with the expectation of the financial community. Does that make sense?
I think you can see as well, though, that they have been making cutbacks. They have been doing things like hiring freezes, consolidating their factories and such like. So you are seeing evidence of them changing their strategy as a result of the share price doing funny things, problems in China as well. And I think the results are forecast on Tuesday to be an estimated 2% drop in sales.
And so what's the... William, you've just started working for a company based in Hong Kong. What's the problem with China then? I know there's been an anti-corruption drive, so this means people don't want to be ostentatiously wealthy.
Yeah.
What are and there's also a slowdown in growth in general. What's the big problem with and why is China such a problem for Burberry?
I think there's quite a lot of questions there, but ultimately I think the Chinese market has grown very rapidly, very quickly. People have invested a lot, and then it's kind of flattened out. There's no huge issue. I think it's just kind of levelling, to be honest.
But the capex investment done before is huge, meaning that they have a lot of exposure with big stores and many stores in many cities. And so if people stop binge buying, like the New York Times was saying this morning, then you have a problem because you still have the expenses attached to your real estate, right?
Louis Vuitton are closing stores in China, right?
I think everybody is
probably
some more silently than others. Who?
They're closing stores too, and then also trying to regain control by getting rid of their wholesale. So that has also got kind of shareholders a bit worried because they're like, well, where's the revenue growth going to come from if you're kind of putting everything in one place? But they're doing positive things, like looking at Korea, trying to re-establish themselves in Japan as well by trying to reposition themselves upwards and make their brand's positioning more in line in a global way.
You're talking about Louis Vuitton or Burberry?
No, Burberry.
Okay.
And opening flagship stores in Tokyo and so on.
Well, there's also a peculiar problem as well, isn't there, with Hong Kong in particular, where Hong Kong's had a huge collapse because there's something like a huge amount of luxury goods, a huge percentage, I can't remember the percentage, but a huge percentage of luxury goods are sold actually in Hong Kong itself to Chinese tourists.
But that's kind of petering out as well now.
Yeah. Because Burberry are closing a floor of their flagship store.
I wouldn't know exactly the difference. I mean, if it's linked what happens in Hong Kong and China, but I guess
and
it
also
is.
the retail costs in Hong Kong are in the top 3 in the world. So people like at other parts of the market, like H&M, were forced to shut their flagship store because the costs were just too high for what they could bring in sales-wise.
Okay.
Let's say also that it's a little bit the bubble theory, it was probably going a little bit out of control, and then there is a moment where it has, as William was saying, to
it's kind of
re-level
leveled
down,
slightly,
But the problem also is that sometimes the fluctuation of stocks on the stock exchange is just psychological, or it's people fearing things to happen, and it doesn't mean that it happens. I'm not an expert, but I've always heard that sometimes it's not attached to something that it's really happening. And China is obviously happening, but the rest, it's doing pretty okay.
And is there also a problem in that probably a lot of the luxury goods sector have focused massively on China, and Burberry, we think, are focused almost focused almost exclusively on China, and is that a bit of a problem? Whereas American economy is still growing, Japan is doing whatever Japan does, and then
has recovered.
Yeah, you can see them shifting, as with other brands. A lot of activity in LA in the last year. So Burberry doing their Periscope show, opening up another new flagship store in New York, etc. So definitely America is a new focus for many of the luxury brands.
That's interesting. And so what do we think? How can Burberry... Well, actually, before we talk about how can Burberry resolve it, let's look at the show.
Which
let's
I think
see
will show what also they're doing to try to resolve it. But
perfect.
And also, if we knew exactly, that would be great, because we could resolve the problems of everybody.
Yeah, I could
because
get paid 10
let's not
million
forget,
pounds a
it's
year.
not only Burberry.
Yeah. But it's our big, I guess with Britain, it's the big
Absolutely.
one.
But all the quoted companies that have announced results in the past, would say 2 years, they haven't had the best results. So it's not only them.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've wondered, maybe 10 years ago, Christopher Bailey was getting a lot of love for his designs, and they seem to get a lot of coverage. Burberry seem to be a little bit less relevant. Is that right? Are they a bit, not even less relevant, but are they a bit boring, perhaps?
Well, I think they've kind of found their position, haven't they? And they have, up until very recently, been kind of selling at that position, and now perhaps it's time for them to sort of update a bit. From what I've seen, I think from what we've all seen of the photos from the show already, I think that's what they're trying to do. But yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know that they're boring. I think maybe that's a bit...
Yeah, I agree, and also I always say this, but don't forget that when you're a 2.5 billion company, you can't be as experimental or, crazy as a Craig Green or a J.W. Anderson, who are stimulating our brains and our fashion.
Vuitton's not boring though, is it?
No, I don't think Burberry is boring. Also, I think boring is quite subjective. I think it's true that there is a little bit of probably Christopher's fatigue also, because I still think what I said 3 years ago, you can't be creative director and CEO of such a big company at the same time.
But there's also
a huge
amount of pressure on him as well. A huge amount of
got
pressure,
the
which
biggest
is
job in the
often
world.
not on other designers in that same role,
Exactly.
He is holding this whole company up.
You know, by the way, that Vuitton doesn't release results. You see the results of the group, and you know that the growth or the negative growth are probably linked to Vuitton than anything else, but you never see the real results of Vuitton, so the pressure is lesser.
Yeah. I mean, there's some hyper desirable clothes coming down this runway.
There's some or there's not? What did you say?
No, there is. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting,
And quite wearable.
Yeah.
Super. Well, I mean, it's interesting. It's a company based on selling wearable. I mean, it's interesting that they're at this stage, and it's only now they're moving into beauty. It's only now that there was a piece in the New York Times. A piece in the New York Times about how they wanted to refocus on leather accessories, which is quite interesting, really, how much apparel they sell or coat, Yeah.
I think that's important though, because I think the accessories, particularly in the men's, have had a bit of a lack of differentiation in the last few years. And I think collection-wise, the last two collections were kind of critiqued for being less, I don't know, boring, if you might want to call it this, or safe. Whereas this looks, we were just talking about the word kind of commercial, these look like they will sell.
But it is less safe as well at the same time. They're trying to be, I think they're trying to be a bit edgier. They're trying to be a bit cooler. I think if you look at the campaign for Spring Summer, that feels very different for them.
Finally.
Exactly.
It's becoming a little bit repetitive.
But I think they are aware that perhaps they have become a little staid, and they're trying to push the kind of barriers a bit.
But I think they have a more complicated job than many others, because if you try to imagine the customer of Burberry, I don't think the young cool kid with some money is dreaming about seeing the Burberry logo under the Christmas tree. I think they're dreaming about completely different type of brand. So it's as if Canali, to quote someone I know well because I consult for them, started doing skirts for men. They would lose their market. You see what I mean? I also think you have to know what your market is. So they went a little bit cooler, and then maybe they went too cool and lost some market share. I don't know. I haven't seen exactly what happens. But this is Burberry. This is, again, not...
Well, I agree. I mean,
and it's not Vuitton either. It's different.
For me, I agree. I mean, one of my questions was going to be, how do you sell luxury? I mean, to me, it seems quite peculiar that all the luxury brands are selling themselves youth, because surely this is about aspiration. It's about, I think, a young person like anybody else, just as teenagers, want to drive an Aston Martin, they can want to wear a £2,000 coat. It makes sense that they would want a slice of old world luxury.
But also somebody who is old enough to afford a Burberry trench wants to look young.
Exactly.
That's
so you
why
can't put it
that's in place, and that's why you can't.
But that's also where the disjoint is, I think.
That's the disjoint of fashion and luxury, full stop, isn't it?
But I think it's the problem that they particularly have at the moment, because there's a bit of mixed, like just what you said, who is the customer who's buying it. Every time I go to visit the flagship store, it's not the same kind of people who are on the catwalk at the moment. There is, like I say, a kind of disjoint, effectively.
Well, one of my questions was about Hermes. That's not cool. Right? It's a luxury good. Mm-hmm. It's not so, the fashion shows. I mean, I've read people trying to write about fashion shows. They can't. And Hermes does absolutely fine. It's fantastic.
Well, there is a big difference at the basis. Hermes is a sort of a status symbol, and there are a few in the world, and I would probably quote Rolex. Yeah. That I don't think it's cool, but people buy a Rolex for their kid when they're 20 because it's safe, because you feel like Hermes, you feel like it will never be out of fashion or tacky or trend or whatever, but it's not trendy or cool, where Burberry behaves in a much cooler or trendier way by having musician on the catwalk, by being one of the most digitalized brand, by having someone as fresh as Christopher Bailey. So it's a different thing. Hermes is a big classic safe machine that actually makes a lot of money with one style of bags and silk.
I think that all the heritage brands are kind of using fashion in a different way to maintain relevance and to ensure that they have customers in the future. And we'll read loads and loads of times about Burberry's kind of social media following, and it's one of the highest brands that has social media following, but are those people actually buying? Not at the moment, but I think Christopher Bailey's right in that he's trying to get the customers in a longer tail type approach.
I mean, also there's something. I mean, their coats are fairly classic, and a classic coat is it's an obvious investment, isn't it? In the same way as a Hermes Birkin is an obvious investment. And I mean, to me, that seems something that's quite easy to get. I mean, maybe it's the other stuff on top of that that's harder to push. I mean, Burberry perfume to me doesn't seem like something that's particularly, it's almost like the disconnect is almost there. Because all of these, everything coming down this runway, I'd quite happily buy if I had that kind of money.
You would this season?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing,
coats.
isn't it?
And what about saying, what would you feel happy about saying, this is Burberry? I mean,
The coats,
how does
yeah.
the brand sound to you?
Well, if it was Prawson, you would say this is Prawson.
Exactly, but that's what I mean. I mean, I don't have a problem. I like products, and unless it's someone I consider unethical, I don't care where it's from, and I'm happy to say. But some people, if they spend $2,000, they want to say it's whoever the trendiest or coolest guy.
Yeah.
So would you mind saying?
But I mean, if I'm buying a duffel coat, I'm not wanting trendy or cool. I want the most classic British duffel coat, aristocratic.
Okay, perfect.
That's,
so that's what Burberry stands for, and that's why I think it could be dangerous to go too much on the cool side.
But this collection is a split down the middle almost, isn't it? I mean,
it's quite well pitched though.
Well, yeah, completely. But the opening looks are the traditional low-hanging fruit. They're the things that they're the investment buy, and then a kind of an MA1 or something which you don't expect Burberry to do in that fashion, and maybe offering something to that younger audience.
It's a bit like they should have done the MA1 at some point. I mean, I'm sure they have, but it's a bit funny to. I can't remember. I'm sure they have put them down the catwalk in the last 6 or 7 years.
What?
The
MA1.
I mean, his collections 10 years ago there were some quite fashion-forward collections that he put out, and
I think the lace stuff of last season and then the other kind of like really shiny leather did put some customers off, and I think those customers will return for this collection.
I couldn't agree more.
But it's also, I presume, autumn-winter's an easier season for them, right?
Well, there's more margin certainly in the products. But I mean, they've also been very clever to focus on their iconic products, the scarf and the trench, in terms of their personalisation and digital options for 160 million options on the trench coat.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a higher number than that there actually is. But
I thought it was quite interesting in the Spring Summer 16 campaign, the shot that's just the scarves. It's like bare chest and scarves with the two girls, and I mean that for Burberry to do that is really kind of pushing things forwards. But obviously, it's very clearly saying it's these products that are making the money.
It's a commercial choice, but I mean, I was analysing all the new campaigns, and even the coolest brands have models with a bag on their face. I mean, in totally unnatural position, because I mean, we all know that what sells is mainly accessories, but you need the fashion to make the accessory, desirable.
Yeah.
We've been discussing this so many times, and we were discussing before the panel. What we love to see on the catwalk, which is not boring, which is fashion forward, which is interesting, which is reinventing the wheel, who buys it? I mean, are these people actually not even making money, not losing money?
But to me, I'm
do
quite
you have
happy.
an answer to that? Who?
No, why not? I just mean I really think that the traditional clothes coming down this runway are what I want them to do. It's just the marketing of it has been quite You know, didn't they have like Princess Eugenie in one of the adverts? I mean, do people in China know who she is?
Well, they shot 40 people, didn't they?
Okay.
It was 40 for that campaign.
Because I get the Beckham, I get having the Beckham spawn in it, but like the you know that makes sense. They're the most famous British people in the country. I do think that there is
a little bit of a distance between the way they behave. They behave with musicians, the first one to have iPad in stores and all of that, and the campaign that. I have to be careful what I say here. I mean, I love Mario and I love his work, but I think that, I don't know if it's Christopher or Mario, but it's been a little bit the same again and again and again, to the point that you didn't even know what season it was. So I believe in consistency and not having a, you know, crazy image that people can follow, but there is a moment where you're like, okay, let's move on. So I do think that there is a little bit of weirdness there, and they invest a lot of money, so their campaign is important. You know,
their campaign is
costly.
It's a news feature for them. You know, it's not just the campaign. You know, when Burberry release a campaign, it's on the news.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is not the same for a lot of other brands. So that investment is obviously paying off on that sense.
Yeah. So let's talk about digital, because Burberry have owned digital, if you like, at least owned the story. They've owned the story that they are the most digital brand, and you know, in my very slow fog, I've realised that the reason why everybody talks about this is because, again, it's good for the share price. And but I'm really interested. They've done so well with digital that Apple nicked loads of people from them, didn't they? So you know, to sell the watch. So
Apple, incidentally, are stealing from everybody.
Exactly.
So it's no big thing that they took.
Probably the highest profile one, but
yeah, I mean, they are taking everyone from everywhere.
I know some people who work at Apple. Their life is like something out of a Puff Daddy video, but and
also completely sold.
So digital. Please, will you guys tell me and the people watching SHOWstudio, just evaluate Burberry's digital. Is it real? Are they as successful as they say they are? You know, they have had an exciting digital strategy, but is it good?
Yes. They definitely do own that title of being digital pioneers, especially if you benchmark them across other people in the luxury sector who, as a sector, has been traditionally super, super slow and really worried about the control aspect, about doing lots of stuff on digital and social, etc. However, what they kind of maybe don't do so well is one of the kind of key aspects of social and digital is to have a two-way dialogue and to really, when they repositioned themselves a few years ago to do the kind of be the accessible brand, well, in reality, they're maybe not that accessible. And I think the recent Snapchat campaign where they showed more unpolished images was a good move in the right direction.
Yes.
But I've done quite a lot of research looking at their social media channels, and I would love to see a bit more of that two-way interaction with customers. Just now it's just a bit too broadcast focused.
Have they got something at the moment where you send in a picture of yourself in a trench?
Okay, so I think what you're saying is accurate, and that's a really good point, because what it feels to me, what Burberry, it's almost like, okay, this is going to sound terrible, but it's almost like your granddad has got Twitter. You know, it's like they are really pushing. Well, yeah. They really, you know, they're really pushing the digital side of things, and they have owned it. But at the same time, it's almost like they haven't quite engaged in a way which is two-way and which is forward-thinking. And their kind of idea is, well, let's get people to send in photos of themselves in a trench. Is that relevant?
Well,
is that interesting?
I think everybody has said the right thing. What I would like to add is that how do we measure the success of a digital campaign? So I think it's obvious that they were pioneers. They were the first one who started doing a lot of digital and advertising or PRing around that. So yes, kudos about the amount of press they had about that and the title of pioneers. But then I also think that a digital campaign, like a PR campaign before, at the time I was still doing PR, it's not really measurable unless it turns into sales or into an increased amount of customers or a fixing of the brand if you need to move it up or down or whatever. So I think a digital campaign has to have an objective. So if their objective was to be the first and the pioneer, yes, perfect. If their objective was to be cooler or be closer to their customer or having younger people, I don't know. I don't see the figures. I don't know who they sell to and exactly what. But so that's my problem, because we've been now talking about Burberry as the only one who does it. They're not the only one anymore. So today, either they reinvent something digitally, like they did with Snapchat, was a good thing. They were the first again. But Ralph Lauren in America is trying to, get the title of the most digitalized huge conglomerate as well. So, everybody is trying to do something at their own level of possibilities.
And also, being first is not always the best thing to be.
Yeah,
actually, it's very
because then you sit there on your success.
You also, whoever comes after you is going to do something that's kind of better than what you've already done. You might have been first and you might be the leader, but whoever comes in after that is going to take all of the information that you've just given them and do something else that's savvier, sharper, faster.
But also what you said about the granddad Twitter, but it makes real sense because, again, Burberry, for who they are and their DNA and what the brand is, cannot, post weird things or I don't know. I don't even know what to say. While some young kids that have no money but they want to launch their collection, they can post themselves naked and it works. Yeah. So again, it has to be a little bit granddad because it's Burberry.
Completely.
Which I think it's an amazing brand compared to what it was 20 years ago.
Totally.
So they've done an incredible job. And it's even quite appealing, and I even, own some Burberry because there are some things that are really amazing. But they can't be out there and tweeting as if they were 18 and, swearing and doing outrageous things.
I don't think people expect that either. I mean, I don't think that, they should be, but I do think it would be good if they opened up to engagement a little bit more and perhaps were producing things that were less standardized. We all think like the reference about taking a photograph of yourself in a trench. I think that is it's a good point because that's kind of the first thing that you might think of how to engage your customer base, but it's not really giving that much.
So what would that be? The interact. I mean, I understand the word how to interact, but what would people like to photograph themselves? People adore to be in the Burberry Instagram page, no?
No, I think that was in reference to the Art of the Trench campaign, which was heavily curated, and obviously you need to do that when you're a luxury brand. But I would like to see just more kind of really simple engagement, talking back to customers, opening up to kind of having a conversation on Instagram, on Twitter, etc. That I think, other things that Burberry I think are really strong at are their customer relationship management, the kind of money that they put into the kind of back unsexy stuff that we don't see. They really do know who their customer are from a bit of a cliche, but the 360-degree perspective. And also they're one of the few brands as well that has a kind of social media account on Twitter specifically, which is just for customer service, which is kind of clever because it means that if you don't do that, your Twitter feed just ends up looking really ugly with people saying, why hasn't this been delivered? I've had a subpar experience inside their store. So they are good at that. And then also as well, they're mobile. They've invested a lot in that because they see that the growth that's going to have now and in the future as well, and that's going to triple their sales in mobile.
But the mobile thing is very clever because I think that's already outweighing people's purchasing, like on desktop, isn't it? It's kind of already tablets and mobile is so much further forward. So for them to invest in that is very, very clever. But I still do think they need to. The back end is one thing, but it does need to be sexier. The front end needs to be sexier.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've wondered about a few times, and I think, if you've got like what you said about people want to be young, that's definitely true. But where is the luxury in not really just their marketing? I mean, part of the reason why we're looking at Burberry is we're not really trying to pick on them so much as they are the big British company and they're a very successful luxury company. But how do you sell luxury online? Because you seem to have this real contradiction between building up this huge audience, of people who might be able to buy the lipstick, but quite frankly, can't buy anything else, and this idea of reach. And then you have, how do you sell luxury? What is luxury? Is it really just putting an amazing photo shoot up? Is it, or an amazing video of Cara Delevingne doing something? Is that it? What can brands do?
Can I interrupt you, because you're asking a lot of questions?
Sorry.
And I'm very interested in the lipstick thing.
Yeah.
Because that was invented by Chanel. It was Mademoiselle Chanel who said, I want everybody to be able to have a piece of Chanel in their bags, and hence the lipstick. And Chanel cosmetic is still apparently huge. But then, and I'm talking about Chanel because I think that Karl Lagerfeld, who is loved and adored, his fashion to me is always a little bit the same, and it's not. Getting myself in trouble here, but it's not so renewing itself, and yet it's hugely successful, and apparently it's written in the figures that the fashion sells as much as that bag and the cosmetics. So
yeah, but he renews himself constantly.
Exactly. So you're answering what I'm going to say. So I think it's a little bit beyond the product. I always believe in the product. I always say if the product is outstanding, it will sell. Maybe I'm wrong, because sometimes it's what you have around, and Karl is an icon, and so everybody thinks that whatever is designed by Karl, and he's laughing all the way to the bank, is a genius. And so...
I think it's just to interrupt, if you look at, like the Fendi charms, for example.
Exactly.
That's the
Exactly. And
answer,
he probably just approved them, you know what I mean?
Totally.
But it comes out of him, who is at 80 probably, because he must be around 80, renewing himself, and he has that iconic look, and everybody knows who he is, and you can sell Karl little dolls, and and nobody else is like that.
Yeah.
So Chanel will be in trouble when Karl can't work anymore.
Yeah.
So and the same, or Hermes. Hermes is an icon of a name. Hermes is reassuring, and I don't know. It's very difficult to be up there.
It's the whole world, though, isn't it? It's not. You're talking about whether it's product or what the world is around it, but I think the product is part of that, and it's the full circle.
Well, my question is a little bit more specific. My question is, what can be done digitally? Because this is a huge question that we're asking. I want to shrink it and say, how do you get that? What have Burberry done successfully, and how do you get the luxury experience online? Because that was the original reason why the fashion industry was so against it, because they were like, you can't get this.
Yeah, but I think it doesn't matter, because if you are whatever we just said about Chanel, then I think then you will sell online, because people want to buy online on their phone.
But you're always going to need
No.
new customers, and that's what Burberry are trying to do. If you look at their website, a couple of kind of good practice things that they do is you can't find anywhere on their website their social media links, because they want you to stay on the website for as long as possible to potentially get you to purchase. There's no other fashion brand that does that, or luxury brand. The other thing that they kind of do well is what we mentioned earlier about the kind of personalization aspect, and they encourage you to log in. They give you like a personal dashboard. Again, this kind of notion of customer service and experience, they're not doing it perfectly, but out of the other luxury brands, they are doing it better. What I kind of see as a trend kind of going forward, and it's a constant evolution, is that particularly for high net worth individuals, or the kind of key customers, is that there's going to have to be closed networks and closed parts of the website that are only available to your kind of core customers, and that's a way I think that digital can evolve online.
The other thing is, I think about the combination of what happens in the real world and how that's communicated online. So there are some luxury brands who have a really beautifully looking site, but they don't sell product. And I think the interesting thing about Burberry is the fact that they do sell product, but how many people are actually spending £2,000 on a trench when they click a button? I think that
happens
what
more and
about-
more. I don't think
it's
that's
starting
a
to
problem
grow,
anymore.
but I think it's still,
But I agree with you. You can have the best website, not only in terms of image, but also in terms of whatever you were explaining. But if you're not hot, cool, glamorous, call it whatever you want, or if you don't have the product, which I think, by the way, Burberry does have, you don't sell. that's where I say it doesn't matter, because I think there are many more things before the digital. The digital is important, but it's not enough.
But for many people, you know, I mean, in England, they've only just got a store in Manchester, right? It's not that old, the store in Manchester.
No, it's new.
So most people's experience of Burberry is digital. I would have thought first, and I think, you know, so that's kind of. I think it is important, and also interesting because on social media there's very little difference between Burberry and H&M. I mean, on Facebook there's little difference. So in the future, you know, when you're come into consciousness in the world, your first realization of Burberry will be very similar to your first realization of H&M, and that's kind of a problem. And so how do the luxury brands build luxury in a content-driven world is kind of.
Well, that's rather interesting, but I would put it reverse. I think the great success of the high street recently, apart from the fact that people can afford easier, you know, an H&M or whatever Zara jacket than a Burberry, it's also that these high street brands have behaved and have appropriated the language of luxury, and hence have become not only the language, they also appropriate the styles and the designs, but apart from, let's not go into that, that's a different panel, but also the language. And I remember probably H&M was one of the first to do it when you were too young to remember, but I remember many years ago when H&M was becoming H&M, they were using the supermodels at the time, the Versace supermodels in a bikini with just the price, and it was like, I remember I was still in Geneva at the time, so it was like 10 francs. Which was the language of luxury with the money that we could spend. So I think that's reverse. But that's why I also think in the digital stratosphere, the language doesn't change much. And that's why the luxury was so slow to get to there, because they were afraid of using a language that was so democratized, right?
Yeah.
Do you agree?
And the control aspect.
Completely.
I mean, you know, I guess there's interesting things that could be done with. I don't know, like this would be so lame if you know anything about digital, but you know, I imagine that luxury brands must be looking at people who are into unboxing and stuff like that and being like, how do we use this fetishization of products? Because I mean, obviously the big difference between Burberry and H&M is the actual product. Like that's the fact that the product is fantastic. But I don't know what you guys think of this.
I think there's a kind of shift at the moment, isn't there? Where so there was some people at Vice who I read in a recent interview were talking about how it's kind of about placing the content that they're producing. They don't want to place the content on the Vice site or on the multiple Vice sites. They want to place it where people are going. Right, so if they're going to an Instagram account, they want to put as much content as possible there because they don't want to try and redirect people. And I think that kind of model is an interesting one when it comes to talking about luxury and digital. Because when you go online, you're not going to have a hugely luxurious experience no matter what happens. So if you have got an ultra high net worth individual who's going to spend that much money on a product, they want to have an experience which chimes with the amount of money that they're spending that makes them feel special. You know, that's what everybody always says. When you get to that level of wealth, you want something that is completely bespoke to you. And actually experience is as important as product. And that's, you know, when you're building the whole world of a brand, it's about how you know, the experience that you have when you're purchasing that product, but also the experience that you have when you're just around it. And I think, you know, maybe a really strong thing is about producing ideas that live in the real world that then are naturally disseminated across digital.
Well, this real world, unless you want to chime in.
I was just going to maybe say that, I don't know, pipe up for digital, to say that I think you can have a luxury experience online, and a lot of the offline things are transferable online, and it's not to say that you should replicate them, but like excellent high quality imagery, really kind of easy to navigate, simplicity, like really beautiful imagery is something that you associate with luxury. So there are some cues, I think.
But do you not think that maybe if the same, you know, somebody who can afford that product and somebody who cannot afford that product, are going to the same place to have the same experience, that it's slightly kind of...
Well, sometimes people that can afford that products don't even need to be seen going into a top luxury store in Bond Street, but they have either some private, how do you call them, private, you know, the people that do private sales, going to their homes, or they order like whatever they want on Net-a-Porter and have someone sending it back. You know what I mean? And whilst the people that start, so they have their first savings to go into that store, they want that experience more. So I think there is a shift in that.
Yeah.
But I also wonder if the new generation of spender, you know, the one that they call millennials, I don't like to give names like this, but do they really care? I think they're much more carefree and less.
Well, this brings
I think all customers, though, they want basic kind of good hygiene factors. They want to be able to make a purchase easily and quickly and to trust the brand. I don't think that goes away no matter kind of what age you are, what type of customer you are. And I think maybe to answer what you said as well, I think in the future there's not that many brands doing it just now, but each of those customers going onto the website will receive a different experience.
Yeah.
And that will be luxury as well.
That shift is starting to happen, I think. You're right. And yes, that's a possibility. I just wanted to go back to what you're saying about hygiene factors. A hygiene factor is a hygiene factor, and therefore you should, you know...
What's a hygiene factor?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't dare say.
Like when you when you have the basics right, whether it's on a website or whether it's in a store, in terms of efficient customer service, being able to buy things
not too overbearing, like finding what you need when you need it, having the size in front of you, like all of those basics. Yeah, the basics, right?
It's like a retail operations.
But if a site or a store, if we're talking about sites, so a digital experience should have those, right? So every brand, that shouldn't even be a conversation. Do you know what I mean? It's like every brand should be achieving.
But in reality,
those things.
like I've done a lot of research in this area, and if any of you have ever bought online, many of the sites are really, really, really bad. It doesn't support a strong experience.
But you also get into stores where stuff costs north of 1,000 and you're treated badly. So what I'm trying to say is that...
But that's why we're seeing the increase
it happens in the real world as
in
well.
brands like companies like Lyst. Their sales are going really, really well because they know their customer. They're offering them a good experience, editorial content. So it aggregates what you like, what you're interested in. It has exclusive products, and it's kind of focused on the luxury sector. And it's maintaining a lot of luxury customers, because if you go to many luxury brand sites, they're just not strong enough, and the luxury brands haven't invested in them.
So that's very interesting. So what you're saying is that they're sort of essentially realising that this customer is worth quite a lot of money, and therefore tailoring the edit and everything for that customer.
Yeah, and that's why we also see Net-a-Porter being an important brand for people buying luxury as well, for different reasons that I said. But it's something like less than 20% of luxury sales actually come from luxury brands' own websites.
Well, that's the big problem in China as well.
Don't you think, I'm asking a question because you seem to be quite an expert, don't you think that the website of a brand, so the mono-brand website, is more of a window because people actually do buy on Lease, Farfetch, Net-a-Porter, etc.?
Totally, but that's why they should be better, and they're not. And it's
but do they really want to? I mean, they know that people, because it's like when you go to Selfridges, shoe heaven, whatever they call it. It's because you know you want a pair of black pumps, but you don't know exactly which one, and so you want to go where you have a choice. While if you go to Prada, you will have the Prada ones.
Yeah.
So this thing always existed, and it probably exists online as well.
But going forward, I think a differentiation of future consumer, not just in luxury but in fashion as well, is going to be the customer service. So and customers will vote.
So the importance of the mono-brand website, you think it's going up? I mean, it's going to
be
for
luxury
more?
brands, yeah, I think, and we've seen that as soon as Chanel announced that they were going to do e-commerce. 2016, end of 2016, all the luxury brands went, oops, okay, let's invest in that area right away.
And one of the things that I wanted to ask, this is linked, and it's linked very much to what you're saying about the real world. So there's this idea that's been around forever, but people repackage it all the time, that young people, you know, aren't interested in goods, they're interested in experiences. And this is like one of the biggest sort of existential threats to luxury. So we see this in kind of all that media based around flights and hotels. I think it's very much what ID were doing with the Muse sort of idea that, well, what people want to do with their money is have an amazing holiday, is have an amazing experience. What do we think does, because Burberry and Chanel and everybody has moved their product massively up market. The prices have shot up way faster than earnings. Everybody's gone real, actual, proper luxury. Very rich people is the future of luxury. That's the last 10 years. What's the future of luxury? What are the threats to luxury? Panel.
Technology.
Technology. I think exactly. Technology.
Yeah, technology is both a threat and an opportunity. It has, if you look at things like what I mentioned about Burberry and the kind of customer relationship management, hardly any brands can understand and track their customer when they go in store and when they go online. Many luxury brands still don't track their sales in real time, which is kind of like crazy in this day and age to be able to react. So data is going to be massive, and being able to use that appropriately. Again, with kind of luxury, high net worth customers, they get a little bit nervous in terms of like privacy concerns and things like that, so that needs to be addressed. That was a couple of things.
I also think that the company that will survive are those that are flexible and able to fast change the strategy or their business model, because I think the real thing that it's happening, and it's been happening for a while now, is that the world changes so fast that it's very difficult to say what's going to happen in a year, because something will come up and revolutionize. I mean, I think Instagram has changed fashion so much more than digital to start with. So if you now sit in a boardroom and you talk about a 3-year plan, people laugh at you, because in 3 years, maybe we're going to Mars and maybe we're building stores. And you know what I mean? Anything is possible, while 5 years ago you were still doing 3 years plan, and that was absolutely normal. So I think the future is being able to adapt and to be flexible and to be open-minded enough to say, let's do it, let's jump on that horse, you know what I mean? Which doesn't mean being, inconsistent or crazy, but still, and I think some of the best fashion houses that have great product have had problems recently because they haven't adapted fast enough.
I think they also need to be able to offer something unique to that not ultra high net, but to that high net worth customer, because I think that's, being able to adapt on a large scale across the full brand is one thing, but actually being able to produce something kind of more bespoke for those individuals is another.
Because you've done some research into this idea that that people want to do things rather than buy things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think people, I think there is a move at the moment towards the experience, and that's across all, that's...
I was going to say that as well, all ages, it's not just young.
Yeah. I mean, I think the millennial side of things, I mean, I quite like that phrase, but I think the millennial side of things, that generation are much more focused on that. But yeah, I think overall, you want to have something that you have that gives you equity, right? So you want to have a story to tell, you want to have something you can put on social media, you want to have something that says, I've had this experience, I've had this luxurious experience. And it's kind of like why people go, and everybody, even though we've seen it a million times, goes and has a photograph with the Mona Lisa, or kind of some huge artwork, or why people are now flying to exhibitions rather than looking at them online. There's a lot of kind of things around that, which is about having that luxurious experience.
And also, can I say something about this? Because I think
that was really...
It was really good, and I'm not going to change topics, but I'm going to add or challenge something. I think that the experience, instead of buying stuff, it's been around for a while in older generations.
Absolutely.
Me, for instance.
Absolutely.
And there has been not a few years now where people were like, what's your dream? Spending 2 weeks on a desert island where you don't even need clothes or bags. Whilst the millennial, for it seems more important for them, because for them the important thing is to have pictures to post. And so if you actually go into the Louvre, you see them, they don't even look around, but they look at an angle to take a selfie.
Yeah.
Which again, I don't want to go into a cultural discussion because that's another panel. But so it's more touch and bite and go, like the Japanese used to visit
There's a
Europe.
barrier, I think. I think you're right, and I think there's always been that kind of feeling of having the experience, and exactly what you were just saying. But maybe in the last 5 years or 10 years, there's just been a wall in the way, which is kind of the evolution of digital, right? And now we're just on the other side of it. So it's just that this new generation are going back perhaps to what you were talking about, but there's just been a kind of a bit in the middle that we have
a frustrated.
I'm excited about this. I'm excited about this idea because I think you alighted on something that's quite blatantly true. If you look at Instagram superstars, and what they're buying, or when they're wearing something, is they're buying the idea of being approved. Which is what a lot of people do by fashion. They're buying the story of being approved by the designer, by the shop. And so what you said, where they're trying to incorporate if you can get the product to incorporate the experience and say, I had this experience, that's like really fantastic.
That's a
very good point.
When people,
and if the brand acknowledges it on social media, it gives you a warm feeling.
Amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
I always think it's really interesting when you see when you're looking at designers' Instagram accounts, especially around fashion shows, and you'll see lots of people kind of underneath sort of celebrating the designer, and it's almost in the same way that you used to nip backstage after a show and say congratulations, right? And it's kind of that inner sanctum. You're like, I got through the door, and by somebody on Instagram doing the same, they're kind of joining the gang, but actually they don't have any connection to the designer, but they almost post in a way that suggests that they are a journalist or an editor or a friend. Yeah, completely.
Yeah, and then if they have a reply, which could be like a smiley thank you face, like, oh my God, he replied to me, it's true.
But it also explains Supreme and Palace and that Nike. It explains that thing of limited edition. It's like, I got through the limited edition. I was cool enough to be allowed in the store to buy this product. Yeah. Everybody saw me. It explains a lot, I think, your point. And I think I think that's quite interesting. So how do you build in this record of experience into luxury goods? I think that's pretty cool.
But I also think that people need clothes because they don't want to be photographed. I know it sounds banal, but they don't want to be photographed with the same dress. Every time everybody has become a little bit of a celebrity that they can wear it only once. So that again buys into the buying phenomenon, no?
Well, there's also people, and this was actually new to me. I didn't know about this until quite recently. But there's people who will order spend thousands on their credit card, order product, wear it, shoot it, send it back. Like stick it
with
on Instagram.
With the label hanging.
Yeah, just tucked in
very
at the back.
obvious. That's very.
That was. I mean, maybe I'm just late to the party, but
See,
yeah.
I didn't,
I
didn't think about it. That's a good thing.
That's a definite bona fide phenomena.
Yeah, but I mean, it's interesting that somebody is that obsessed with having the latest and looking that good at that point that they're willing to kind of invest in that way. Yeah. Even though they are eventually getting money
take
back.
a risk.
But
they're not even investing because they send back 2 days later.
Or investing time, perhaps. Or
investing
energy.
Just to wrap up, how are we doing for time? Sorry. 15 minutes. All right. So okay, not just to wrap up.
50 minutes.
Oh, we're on 50 minutes. So we are going to wrap up. Okay. Right. Sorry. Fourth wall, you are broken. Just to wrap up. Why isn't there a Burberry? Why is there just totally not in sight another? Will there be another Burberry? Isn't it a Porter I know it's owned by the Swiss or Ukes now.
No, Italian.
Ukes, sorry. Yeah, Richemont sold it, right? Sorry.
Not really, but yeah, it's a bit more complicated, but...
Sorry.
They merged, yes.
So is it, where's the next luxury? Because Burberry 20, 30 years ago, people wouldn't have said, oh yeah, that's the next Calvin Klein. So is there anybody in the UK or even abroad that's coming up behind?
But does it still make sense? The question to me is to be that big because whenever I talk to people that are trying to launch a brand or, there's still people that want help to launch a brand. I'm like, don't aim at being huge, because I don't think it makes sense anymore, because then you have huge amount of money in real estate and instead whatever. And so, but that's a good thing you said about Burberry and Net-a-Porter or Yoox Net-a-Porter Group. This is a brand, this is a retailer in a way. It's not a brand, but it is a brand. And that's why, I don't know, it's quite interesting to see that that's what you said, meaning, is this a fashion brand as well in your mind?
I would
Do you
say
see what I'm trying to
it
say?
has its own label, so yeah, I would say yes to that question.
So because they produce...
In the eyes of the customers, again,
It
with
is.
people who I've done research with, they see it as a brand, and it has its own brand as well. So
I was just going to say, I think that when you were talking about what's the future of luxury, I think that perhaps that's a very good point, and maybe it's not about huge brands. Maybe it's not about internationals or global brands. Maybe it's about offering a beautiful product that you have to make an effort to get, that you can't buy online perhaps is one option, or that lots of other people don't have. And I think maybe that's really where things are going, is,
The explosive growth is in like the churches and the goyards, right?
Mhm.
Like that's the thing that probably the stories.
I think there isn't explosive growth. I think that's more the same as what
It's
we all
slower.
seem to be
Yeah,
saying.
slow growth.
and
Yeah.
healthier,
Yeah.
It's...
There's a couple of brands in Japan which are quite interesting, which, they will not sell in any other store than their store there. And their product is the same price as a Burberry product, but you have to add on your flight. You have to add on your hotel, because and then you have a product which nobody else has got. Well, obviously some other people have got, but very few people. And actually, really, that's the thing, isn't it? And it might not be ostentatious, it might not have a brand logo on it, but anybody who does knows that you have really kind of made a pilgrimage. And that's maybe going back to the same thing as going to see,
the best
flying
holidays
to see a show.
in places hard to get.
Yeah.
To they will never have a Thomas Cook 20 stories hotel there, because they cannot fly big charters there. So it's a little bit the same thing. I do also think that it's not even the future, is already now. People want more niche. They want to belong to a tribe, and my tribe is that Japanese brand that I only know where to find. Or someone who does things made to measure for me.
But this is what the... Sorry.
I was just going to say, it's not necessarily a new thing, but people have been saying for a while that the next big brand is the brand of the consumer themselves. They're being just like they are the celebrities, because of the way they pull different stuff together, and in the future being able to personalise perhaps all of the garments that they have on. So,
but it's more than just getting your
monogram.
it's much more than that. It's actually about colour, cut. It's really, I think that's where things are going. It's like you have a silhouette, and you then form that silhouette to you personally.
Okay, so I think we better go to closing thoughts. William, I'm going to start with you. Closing thoughts. I guess I would like to know what could Burberry do? Burberry is successful. Burberry is, it's something that Britain should be proud of. It's something to look up to. But what could they do better?
I think that they could create digital strategies which are more engaging, as we've talked about, and perhaps offer, it doesn't need to be youth, but it needs to be a bit cleverer. I think it needs to be a bit fresher than it is. And leading is perhaps one thing, but actually coming up with an idea that kind of offers the audience a bit more, and maybe gives them something that they then want to kind of push out themselves, rather than necessarily... It seems all very kind of front-facing rather than anything going back the other way.
Similar. So again, more of the kind of dialogue stuff that we talked about. I'm not a huge fan of the website, and particularly if you look at the product shots, I think they could do with a bit of a refresh, and maybe a move away from some of the kind of formulaic singer catwalk show kind of stuff, but keep doing what they're doing, because it's making more of the other luxury brands do exciting stuff. So I would never want that to change.
Mimma.
I don't know, and if I did, probably I would send them a proposal. However, I think.
Are you saying I have to pay you?
No, that. I think the first thing I would do is asking Christopher Bailey to find himself a CEO who he loves as much as he used to love Angela Arendt, because I think part of the success in the past 10 years was the incredible connection they had.
The collaboration.
It's very hard. Sometimes it's very hard for big brands to have a CEO and a creative director getting along so well, and that's so important. So for me, that's a problem, and I think also they should keep doing what they do. Maybe move on a little bit with their kind of communication and with the discourse behind it, because we've heard it, But again, we heard it because we're here studying this thing and doing panels. The public out there doesn't know as much.
Yeah.
However, I don't see how it's humanly possible to have such a big job in such a big company. So probably I would split it in two again.
Let the pressure off a little bit. I think.
Yeah. Because how can you create when
you
have to see the lawyer for whatever, some real
Can't make
estate you have to sell in Korea, It's not your job. Or I'm sure he's very good, but I think he should go back.
And you chose the
full-time.
entire menu in the in-store restaurant.
Incredible.
I didn't.
Incredible.
Wow. But
Did
we've
he cook
all
it
heard
as well?
about the desks.
I haven't heard about the desk.
Silver frame. One thing you're allowed.
Yeah, that's your only personal object, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh.
But it works. I when I used to work at Vice, I used to make everybody have nothing on the desk.
Were you such a boss
Yeah, nothing
that you
on the
decided
desk.
what people had on the desk?
Only on my table, the fashion table.
Okay.
So, thank you very much, panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.